Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you, David, for this awesome presentation before us. I have to say I was a little bit nervous, but now with that motivation, I feel like all ready to give this talk. So the only thing I would need is the clicker. Oh yeah, you had it. Okay, thank you so much. All right, so now we can get started. And so the talk I want to give you today is a journey through Silicon Valley. And now I'm originally from Munich in Germany, and I have been in the Silicon Valley for almost 4 years now. And when I think back what happened, it's a little bit crazy. I have to admit I have been at 4 big companies in the Silicon Valley now. And then sometimes when I tell that to people, they're like, 4 companies, what happened? Like, why did you switch these companies so quickly? And I'm going to show you from the beginning how that came to be and how we actually built all these awesome robots at the same time. So I have a question for you, and that is, do you like to play games? And I personally, I like to play sometimes these board games. And these are board games where you have to like think ahead a little bit, and you have to like think about your strategy, and everyone is a little peacefully like building some things aside, and then on the side. And then sometimes you have these kind of games where you like trade a sheep for stones. And so sometimes you might think, I wish my career would be like this a little bit. I can plan ahead, I can talk to people, I do some trades, and it's all gonna work out. We're gonna build a great product. So my experience on the Silicon Valley was it's a little bit different. It's more like this. So if you have played this game before, it's kind of unpredictable. You have to go along, and then at some point someone has all the money and you don't even know what to do anymore. So in that spirit, let's start at Go. And where did this all start? And for me personally, it started at the TU Munich. And I just want to show you some things we did there. So we had a lab there where we built kitchen robot. We had these 2 awesome robots. One of them was home built, the other one was from Willow Garage. And we did perception, planning, and all kinds of robotic-centric algorithms to make a robot actually do things in the kitchen. Like, for example, do a sandwich, cook some Bavarian sausages, place things on a tray, just pick up the tray and bring it somewhere else. So these kind of things are very easy for humans, but they are incredibly hard for robots. And they're incredibly hard for robots for various different reasons. And one of them is, of course, perception, just understanding what is going on in the world. And the other thing is manipulation. Like, we have very sophisticated manipulators, our hands. We are not there yet in terms of robotics, where we have all this soft body, intelligent, built-in manipulators. And so then I went on and did computer vision, and I had the fortune to meet some people from ETH Zurich and came into contact with event-based computer vision sensors, and that at that time was something really exciting for me, because nowadays what you do is if you do computer vision, you take an image, and you do something on this image, and this image is basically it's a picture. And now if you do things on a video, it looks like things are moving, but essentially what it still is, it's just a sequence of pictures. It's picture, picture, photo, 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 photo. And you have all these still images, and you're trying to make sense of them. So that sensor did something completely else, and it produced a sparse output of information where only the things which changed over time were actually transmitted to the PC. And so that allowed us to build very, very small units, like really the size of a quadcopter, for example, or very small mobile units. And I developed some computer vision algorithms like tracking, SLAM, and object detection with that. And so then another thing which then went into my PhD thesis were superpixels, which had like a similar idea. Instead of computing things on a full dense image, you reduce, like, you really have to imagine a dense image that's like 2 million pixels. And for each of these pixels, you have to do something. You have to do some computations. While most of the pixels on the image are actually extremely similar in a neighborhood, so you waste a lot of computational efforts there. And so there are algorithms called superpixels, which basically cluster things together and try to create a more efficient representation for subsequent algorithms. And so there, I think I learned a very important lesson, and that's it. Less is actually often much more. And that will play a different role later in the startup of OTTO also, which we did. So now, let's go on. That was Munich. And then I had the fortune and the luck that I got a job offer at Google, Google Robotics in the Silicon Valley. And Google at that time acquired 7 robotics companies. And in 2013, so I joined Google in 2014, about half a year after that. And they wanted to build a really great robotics project. And so they bought this company. I think every one of you saw robots from that company. It's Boston Dynamics. They have these awesome robots. Atlas on the left and Spot on the right. So Spot is the stork-like robot, like big like that. They do these awesome videos. They're considered as one of the most advanced robotics hardware builder. And that was one piece in Google's plan. And then there were other robots from a Japanese company called Shaft, which built new linear actuators. So these things you see on the left and right there, these are actually kind of not hinge joints, which move like that, like a lot of robots do it nowadays, but they were linear actuators, which move like that. And so they could had a much better power density and could actuate their robots much better. And there was this is another company which was about unloading boxes from a truck, so much more practical, really something which is happening all over the world. There's a big rig coming into a warehouse. There's all these boxes in it, and they need to be unloaded and put into a conveyor belt. So currently there's people doing that, and it's a very repetitive, very boring task, of course. And boxes can be heavy, so it puts some strain on the human body. And so they built a robot system to automatically unload these trucks. And there was also a little bit a company called Bot and Dolly. They basically built, was really fascinating. They did these shows where they had robots and art kind of mixed together. So that was all awesome, and we had a really great team. But then how it sometimes happened, and in that case it happened from the top, there were problems with the leadership. What we ended up with was this. Just 4 years later, Bloomberg concluded Google has made a mess of robotics. These companies were sold off again. The team was broken apart. Some people went to Google. Some people went to do other startups. And everyone got a little bit depressed in the sense of if Google cannot make robotics work, then maybe robotics doesn't work. Maybe it's not possible to do intelligent systems like that. And so there's another very important lesson for me there was what Google did wrong is they overpromised. They said, we can do this. We can build these machines right now. But then in the end, they didn't even underdeliver. They basically didn't deliver anything. And there's, of course, people now, like a lot of these smart people, which I had the fortune to work together there, they're now continuing trying to build other robots at Google, do reinforcement learning, all these great things. But we are far away from actually releasing something which we would see as, like a robot, something coming here on stage, bringing me this clicker, for example. And so then, me personally, what I went on the little wheel of the journey, I went on to become a co-founder in the autonomous truck startup called OTTO. And we were 5 co-founders. Our CEO was Anthony Lewandowski. He was one of the co-founders of the Google Car project many years earlier, and together with Sebastian Troon and other people. And so he had this, basically, together with Lior Ron, this idea is, let's build autonomous trucks. And Google has been working on autonomous cars for quite a while there. So why trucks now? And there was actually a very compelling story here. In America, there's a saying, if you bought it, a truck brought it. And you really have to imagine in America, like a lot of the goods traffic, it's about 70% of the commercial freight activity is actually trucks. There's no trains, it's not ships or airplanes, it's really trucks. And America is a really big country. A lot of traffic goes from the East Coast to the West Coast. And in total, this is a 355 billion US dollar revenue enterprise. So this is about as much as the special effects industry or the gaming industry. So there's a lot, it's a giant industry just transporting things with trucks over highways. And there's other aspects, of course, that trucks use a lot of fuel. really a lot of fuel. So if you just would make a truck a little bit more intelligent, that it maybe doesn't drive like 60 miles per hour, but just 58 miles per hour, or you can, for example, queue them up on the highway so that they drive like closer after each other. You can actually save fuel, and if you only save 10% of that fuel, that's a giant amount of fuel. And then, of course, in the sense of climate change, also carbon dioxide, which we do not emit. And another aspect there was also that 90% of the truck market is owner-operated. So it's not just some big companies which control how the freighting works, but it's really individual people who own one truck, maybe two trucks, and that's it. So the last and most compelling reason, of course, was the highways look like this. So it really looks like that. 50 miles just straight through nowhere land. So people, it's really boring doing this. It's really boring driving like that. You do this 8 hours a day. Truck drivers get drowsy. They fall asleep. They need to make a lot of breaks. So if they have like a long route from one side of the country to the other side, it takes them like 2 or 3 days. And so if you like build a first prototype and you think in your head, how can we build an autonomous car to do that? Well, then you come up with this. Enable autonomous mode is just set the steering straight and set the speed to 25 miles per hour. It's going to work fine. Like nothing is going to happen. It's not that simple, of course. And it's actually surprisingly not that simple because although you have much less of the drama which you have in an inner city with pedestrians and traffic lights and sign detection and all of these things which make it like a very dense, high energy kind of area, this is much more open. Then sometimes you do have these scenarios. And if you want to build an autonomous system, you need to be prepared for them, even if you're on the highway. So out of that considerations, basically, the idea was, let's create a kit which we can put on a truck. We can retrofit trucks. A lot of trucks are really old. People don't really buy a new truck to just get an autonomous truck. So our idea was, let's build a kit which transforms a truck into an autonomous vehicle. And so we set off to do that. And about 3 months later, we had this. So don't apply. We're not hiring anymore for the startup. But so that was our first video which we released where we made OTTO public. And we had this truck self-driving on highways in Arizona. And so this was pretty amazing also for us. I was responsible at OTTO for building the software, for building the perception. And you might have seen this in the video shot. It really looked like that. There's no driver in the seat. And so we did all of this whole truck drive fully autonomous. And you can see you have the typical sensors there on top. There's 2 cameras. There's a GPS sensor in the middle there. We had Leiter sensors on the side and a radar on the bottom. So now, some people criticized us for that and said, how can you do this? This is unsafe. There's no driver in the seat, and you were just like 3 months in your startup. How can you possibly have done a safe system like that? And so I want to tell you a little bit a story about this. And first, this is how it looked from the outside for the camera. This is how it looked in the inside. So this is myself there. I'm actually with a laptop and observing how the whole system works. The other two guys, they are like safety drivers. And that in the bottom there is Matt. And this truck, while he was doing this, had officially a safety driver. The safety driver was not in the seat. He was like cowering there. He was not hiddenly kind of controlling the truck or anything like that. He was just there ready to jump in case anything would have happened. And we practiced that. We really practiced this a couple of times. How long does it take him to get into the seat? How long does it take him to kind of disengage and take over control of the truck? What does this mean in the speed of the highway? And it was fine. It was really fine. It's like the truck just doesn't, suddenly turn his wheel and leaves the lane. So if our software would have disengaged, there's about like a half a second where the truck keeps on driving straight, and this gives the driver enough time to jump in. But there was a much more important story here is this was a really scary thing to do for a safety driver because ultimately, he had the responsibility if something would have gone wrong. And so why did he do that? He wasn't, pressured to do this, or he said like, someone needs to do this, otherwise you'd lose your job or anything like that. No. What we did is from the very beginning, from the very first time we tested these trucks, we made sure that we always briefed our safety drivers very detailed about this is what the truck can do, this is where he's driving safely, this is the operational kind of domain where we know that the software is really working 100% of the time. And if you see certain other conditions, this is things we're currently working on, and that might be a case where you need to take control of the truck. So for example, at the very beginning, we had some problem with extreme contrast, light and shadow, so when there were like suddenly clouds coming, because our cameras, we didn't have yet control over the auto exposure of our cameras. So we were kind of at the mercy of the camera itself. Sometimes it was on the dark side, sometimes on the light side, and we couldn't control that and couldn't guarantee that we actually keep the things inside which we needed to keep inside. But we knew that, so we could tell them, and say, hey, if there's clouds coming up and you see a certain pattern on the road evolving, be prepared that you need to engage, or just engage even if you see that already, because we know that this is something which we don't want to test. And so this continuous flow of information, that built some trust between the software development team and the safety driver team. And they knew that we weren't just crazy people who were pushing our luck, but they knew that this was a very carefully engineered process, and we were exactly aware of what was going on or not going on. And so that's why he then basically said, yes, I trust you guys, I can do that, we can do this. And it went fine, like all the other truck rides we did. We never had anything scary or crazy happening. So my lesson learned here was never disappoint your safety driver, and I think this applies to a much bigger context also, because with every software, and especially with autonomous vehicles and robots you build, at the end, there's a software team building software, but then there's also a team which is actually using these things in reality. And they see a completely different world. They see a world where things operate with reality. They see all these little things which you haven't thought about really well sometimes maybe, or you have forgotten them. And they come back to you and say things like, it doesn't work. I don't know what's going on, it just doesn't work. And you have to take them seriously. You have to take these people, let it be safety drivers or people who interface with customers, listen to them, and fix the things. And if they come back and they say it doesn't work because the instructions weren't clear, well, then you have to fix the instructions. So we had a lot of discussions there and said, like, you're too disruptive, you're taking too much risk. And I think people assume that being disruptive and producing quality is kind of a contradiction. And I have like two quotes here for you. This famous one, "To boldly go where no man has gone before," comes from Star Trek, of course. Like, no one has really done these things where there's no driver in the seat. And then on the other side is how can we make sure we produce excellence after just a short period of time? And one thing I really want to mention here is we really had not much code. And some people think that's a bad thing because the software is just not mature enough. But I believe it's the opposite. Sometimes there's a bias in the software industry that more code is better because it means more people worked on it. It means people have worked longer on it. It means they had more time to produce things. But that's not quite right. It's actually the opposite. If you can solve a problem with less code, you have less bugs. I mean, of course you have less. If you have half the code, you have half the bugs. The code is easier to understand. It's easier for a human to go through and know, okay, these are the things I need to kind of have in my head if I want to understand how the system works. And so if he has to read less, if he has to understand less, it's easier to do. Of course, it's better to maintain. And so we kept this principle at OTTO. We kept it at we already had it at Google. That's kind of where it started a little bit, and we have it at Nvidia now. If you can have, the fewer code you have, the better it is for your project. So we went on from the first drive to some funny instances where this is actually not my car who ran out of battery, but it's the truck who ran out of battery, because we had a whole rig of GPUs in the truck. And if you left it on at some point, the battery went empty and the truck needed to be jump-started. Up to this tremendous success which we had, we actually created a world record of the longest continuous journey by a driverless and autonomous lorry. So lorry is the English word for semi-truck, basically. This was 120 miles, 3 hours, without a driver in the seat. There was a driver in the cabin, and this time he wasn't crouching down there where you saw it in the first time, but he was just sitting really like you saw it in the marketing video. He was sitting in the back there and just basically waiting until the truck arrived. We won the hot new startup at the Crunchies, and then finally we got acquired by Uber for this 680 million because they were just about to create an autonomous driving team at Uber. They already had a team which was doing cars, and now they also wanted one which was doing trucks. So everything perfect, everything good. And then how it goes, what comes next is the drama. And so the drama started with this. Uber was accused of calculated theft by Google of its self-driving car technology. And so this giant battle between Google self-driving cars, Waymo, and Uber self-driving, we were part of that then, unfolded. And it was actually quite an interesting thing to see because I was basically the lead software engineer and the person who wrote all the perception for the auto truck. Together with, we were 5 other people in the core team in the beginning. And we started from zero. We started from an empty repository. So when we heard these kind of things, it's like Google accuses Uber of, we were always like, there's nothing. Nothing which we took over. You were just jealous that we could do something which you have kind of tried to do for a long time in such a long period of time. But this giant marketing campaign unfolded. It went personal in the sense of Uber created a giant mess. It was then Uber abandoned the auto trademark. Anthony Lewandowski got fired by Uber because reasons. We even went to this point where Wired got a bit weird, and they had this headline: "God is a bot, and Anthony is his messenger." I don't really know where they got this one from. And it also became this little twist where hidden evidence and kind of there's something going on. So in the end, it's kind of, there was a lawsuit and someone agreed to pay some other company money, and then everything kind of disappeared. Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, this wasn't the main reason why he left Uber or got fired by Uber, or however you want to call it. It certainly didn't help though. So we, in the meantime, the engineering team, we were at Uber, and we built self-driving cars. We continued using our truck autopilot, and we built a highway driving autopilot for cars. And this was also a very interesting step for us because we started doing simulation to reality learning. And that's something I'm going to mention just after that. Because you probably heard it, I have to say, neural networks are everywhere right now. And so there is this big question of how can a neural network actually perform well? Because fundamentally, neural networks are empirical things. You look at a lot of things, like data, inputs, results, you learn something, and then you can test it on some input data set, and you see, yes, I get these percentages of my input data set right, so it's probably going to go well. But you haven't really logically understood the problem. Like, there is no, you cannot sort of say prove that an algorithm which uses in your network is actually giving you the right results under certain conditions. That's just not possible. You don't have this kind of thinking step where you use logic and you really know when you understood the problem space. And so what can you do? And this is one technique which we used for auto trucking. And I think it's a very successful one. One worth highlighting is that you use in your network for the sensor near data processing. So for example, you have an input image, and this goes back to these 2 million pixels. You need to do some operations on these 2 million pixels. So building some logical optimization algorithms is always extremely hard because you need to find a good way to encode the rules, to kind of encode some domain-specific knowledge, and then kind of put this together with this giant input space you get. So neural networks there are extremely helpful. On the other side, where neural networks are a little bit still have a tough time is then in the end you often want some higher level result from the neural network. For example, saying these are the cars, and maybe there's one car in the image and maybe there's 20 cars in the image. You just don't really know very well. And then you have these things like 3D poses or obstacle boxes. And so people, of course, found a way to do this with neural networks. But another way is that you actually use an optimization algorithm, which more comes from the classical computation, and you put this after the neural network. So you don't do an end-to-end solution, which starts with the image and ends with some lane lines, but you use a neural network to do the biggest chunk of the work in the beginning. You have some intermediate output, and then you use an optimization algorithm to actually produce the results you want. So one very successful example of that is, you probably heard about this, is AlphaGo. It's doing exactly that. So AlphaGo is a game engine which plays Go, the game of Go. It was developed by Google. And what they do is they have a neural network which evaluates board positions. So you have this Go board, and it's a giant board. You can place these stones on it, and there's certain rules which decide who wins, of course, maybe you know. But one very important thing is to know, if you have this board, to kind of have an estimate of, is white going to win or going to lose? You basically want to know if this is a good position or a bad position. And so doing this logically, in the classical sense, is really like you try out different moves. You say like, okay, what about if I put this stone there and this stone there, and then he puts this stone there, and then I put it there, and you have this very deep trees which you try to analyze. And that is it takes a lot of time. And especially for a game like Go, where you have a lot of possibilities, it becomes infeasible. And so you can use a neural network to analyze these poses, and just look at them, give them as an input. It's a very good input space for a neural network. And the result is just a number which tells you, yeah, I think white is probably going to win with 60% probability. And so then after that, you do a tree search, and you find your optimal move. So if your neural network is occasionally suboptimal, so then the additional optimization algorithm adds the required layer of robustness here. So after 1 year then, I went on and left Uber and joined Nvidia, and that's where I am today. And one of the main reasons for doing this is I can work on robotics again. I started with robotics. The autonomous trucks and cars were fun, but kind of my heart lies in robotics. And so what we do now here is we built these intelligent robotics machines, and so we don't build the hardware, like with everything before I showed you. We built the software here. We built an SDK called Isaac SDK, which was announced a couple of times already by our CEO at GTC conferences. And one big thing we are doing here now is simulation to reality. And I have a video for you here. Yeah, so this is one of our pet projects right now. It's a food delivery robot. We're looking at other use cases. So these are just examples of things you can build with Isaac SDK. And we'll give another talk tomorrow at the Hack Zurich, and there we'll talk more about Isaac SDK if you're interested. And other than that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, David.